Similarly, like I mean, to pick an example that's a little bit of a flex, if you'll forgive me that, but like on my last record, we got the number one in the UK, and that doesn't fall out of the sky. You know, we worked really fucking hard to make that happen. But on the day when I got it, there was a part of my brain who that instantly just went fucking sell out.
Welcome back to the Rockman Power Hour, a podcast where we talk to the most interesting people in the world of pop culture and everything in between. This week on the show, Ryan, our guest, is none other than Frank Turner.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that because Frank Turner is a name that has existed in music for a long, long time. A lot of people aren't aware of Frank Turner, but the ones that are diehards, because everybody that I mention him to, it's either this. It's either, oh man, I love Frank Turner. I've been listening to him ever since he put out his first record in 2006, 2007, whatever. And then there's the other people going, I've heard the name, but I've never really listened. I should do it. I should do it. They do it, and then they're fans. So that's one of the reasons why I think this guy's always on an upward trajectory, and why he's becoming one of the hottest quote unquote underground musicians, and he's been for so long because the guy just delivers, man.
Yeah. And the thing is, I love careers like his. I also love careers like NoFX, where you could just do your thing and you're here, but you're not here.
Yeah.
And when you're here, you could dip and fall. I would rather be steady like a freight train, find your audience, and just be able to not coast, but at the same time, just be completely authentically yourself for the rest of your career with no divots and strange and strange choices of genre. He just seems like a really authentic guy that does his thing, and luckily there's millions of people that frankly love what he does.
Oh yeah, and he's authentic, he's talented, and he's just a good dude, man. And it really comes across in the conversation that we got to have with him. I want to say though, before we get any further, we have to thank our friends who help us keep the lights on here. Heartbeat Hot Sauce, the heartbeat of the Rockman Power Hour. We've been raving about this one because it's the one that's been going through my house as rampant as the cold, and that is Salsa Verde from Heartbeat Hot Sauce. Is the Laurent Dagenet and Heartbeat collab. It's a really, really good hot sauce, Ryan. And I'm going to give you the ingredients really quickly. Okay. This is all that's in there: distilled vinegar, serrano peppers, jalapeno, poblano pepper, pineapple, tomatillo, onion, lime juice, garlic, scallion, honey, olive oil, avocado oil, parsley, sea salt, cilantro, oregano. That's it. And it's delicious. And it's not hot. This one is mild to medium. And what's great about Heartbeat is that they've got these hot sauce meters that are on the back that'll tell you when you're dealing with something that is kind of mild all the way to extra hot.
Mm-hmm.
I love Heartbeat, and I think you should try them if you haven't yet. Use our promo code Rockman20 right there.
Rockman20.
And get 20% off your entire order. And so thank you to Heartbeat Hot Sauce. Thank you to our friends at Studio House Designs as well. They give us these great shirts that are just awesome. You know, I love Studio House Designs. They're a great t-shirt company out of Philadelphia. We always love supporting them. They've always got great stuff coming. So make sure you check them out at studiohousedesigns.com. And Audio Technica, keeping everything sounding smooth.
Yeah, with the best robot arm in the business.
We appreciate you guys. So, Ryan,
Yes.
Frank Turner, great dude, great musician. New album's called Undefeated. It came out at the beginning of May, and he has announced a tour. He's going to be playing in Toronto in the fall. No Montreal date yet. Hopefully we get one soon. But I've seen this guy play live before. Takes no prisoners, dude. Takes no prisoners live. Just leaves it all on the stage. Super humble guy too. Like no ego at all, but man, shoots from the hip, not afraid to say what he feels. And I love that because a lot of people are so careful about everything. And he's just, he's got his opinions and they're valid ones, but it's just great to hear stuff about certain things we thought was a certain way, but it wasn't at all. And I don't want to give anything away, but there's one moment in this chat where we talk about a very big 90s Britpop band, and it's great. It's really good. So I don't want to keep, anyone in
suspense.
That's the word I was looking for. I don't want to keep anyone in suspense if you are in suspense, but our chat with Frank Turner is great. So here it is right now. Check it out. Our chat with Frank Turner right here on the Rockman Power. So I wanted to first of all thank you for coming on, because my connection with you probably don't even remember. I met you at Festival d'été de Québec when you were opening up for the Foo Fighters.
Yeah. I remember this for sure.
And in the time I was working for radio, and they arranged a bunch of radio hosts to come back and say hi. And you were, I just remember you being, you're very smiley, you were very friendly, and you weren't allergic to doing the things you needed to do. And it's like, oh, I could just see the label rep going, hey, we've got these radio hosts from Quebec that want to come and say hi. And you were just so nice. And I remember that.
I'm glad you caught me on a good day. You see me on my bad days.
But I remember you went on stage and you absolutely annihilated it. It was just a great show. And I'm sure you remember that. I'm sure you remember that.
I'm not really the person who's allowed to say this, but I do remember us kind of smashing it that day.
Yeah, you did. And I don't know if it was because the Foo Fighters were up next and they are a force to be reckoned with live, but you definitely did a lot more than just warm up the stage for them.
Well, that's kind of me to say. Thank you.
But it was pretty much my first connection with you in terms of the music and seeing it live. And immediately I did a deep dive and went back. And being the age I am, I grew up on guys like Billy Bragg. For me, talking to the Taxman about poetry was such an important record. So when I heard you, I was like, this almost seems like this generation's Billy Bragg. Now, am I right to kind of draw that comparison? Was he an influence?
You're not the first person to say it. Bill is a friend of mine and is a wonderful, wonderful human being. It's a funny thing. I always sound slightly defensive when I say this because I literally am. So I'm just going to say it anyway. Like when I started doing this thing, I've been in hardcore bands for 8 years or so, and
Right.
sort of run out of steam with that a bit, and I'd started listening to my musical education was kind of upside down. Like I got into kind of Maiden, then Nirvana, and then Black Flag. That's an extremely short version of that story, but I'd never heard Neil Young or Bruce Springsteen, or I had never even really heard the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, really. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
I sort of had this moment of being on tour in a hardcore punk band and sort of running around being like, have you guys heard Neil Young? And everyone's just like, yes. And then, so when I started, my old band broke up, I got an acoustic guitar and I was trying to sound like Neil Young and apparently failing. But because, I play guitar quite hard and I sing pretty aggressively, and for obvious reasons in terms of my musical schooling, should we say. And then, it was about a year into my career. Everyone and their fucking dog was telling me I sounded like Billy Bragg, and I'd never heard Billy Bragg. So I went and got a Billy Bragg record, and really enjoyed it. The first thing I got was the "Must I Paint You a Picture" kind of compilation thing that they did in the mid 2000s. It had just come out, so which was a great introduction. And I have dived deep, whatever. And as I say, we've become friends. We've done lots of shows together, and he's been a really supportive guy in my career. But my sort of initial thinking about what it was I was trying to do was more. I wanted to be a country singer, and it just didn't come out like that when I played what I thought was country music. So.
No, but the lyrical content is very much in that vein of
Sure.
telling a story and hardships of the story. And I think the Billy Bragg comparison isn't necessarily, I don't even want to say the style of music or what you're doing. I think it's more where you come from, and that's what it is. I think it's more in your DNA,
And a major part of it as well is just the resolution to sing in my native accent. It is still surprising to me the number of English bands who sing in a sort of cod American accent. The worst example, of course, being the Rolling Stones. It's just like, Angie, and it's like, you're from Southwest London. I know your house. But to this day, and even I have to say, to a degree, in Million Dead, I was slightly guilty of it, and it just seemed insincere to me somehow. That's not how I. It's not how I talk. There is a British band called Chaz and Dave, who I adore. I have tattoos for their lyrics, and they've always been a huge influence on what I do. And one of their distinctive features is that they sing in a London accent because they're a London band, and I always love that.
Yeah, and it's so true, because there's so many bands that that will try to adopt an accent, and I don't even know if it's maybe because what they grew up on and what they were, but it is nice to hear somebody like, obviously Sleaford Mods, like, not shying away from it at all.
Sure. Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's nice to
very
hear
much so.
somebody sing in their own accent. 100%.
It's definitely more common these days than it used to be.
Yes.
Arctic Monkeys gone down. Sorry, you were saying, right?
Oh, I would love to sing in a British accent because I think it would make me more interesting. But that happens a lot where you were talking about punk music and just growing up, England was this mythical place where we were hearing about the Sex Pistols 20 years after the fact. And I went to England, and I'm like, oh my God, it's gonna be littered with punks. I'm finally gonna be home. And I'm like, what the fuck is with all this Tommy Hilfiger shit everywhere? Because, I'm thinking about a time in history. But
But it's
but
the other way.
yeah.
The grass is always greener because I grew up watching, the Decline of Western Civilization and Almost Famous, and the idea of being in a van. I read Get in the Van by Henry Rollins like it
Yeah.
was a fucking instruction manual. I probably read it like 50 times when I was a kid. And I did my first tour when I was 16, very much based on that book. It was like, I'm in a band. What do bands do? They tour. How do tours get booked? Well, you just fucking do it yourself. So me and my best mate booked a UK tour from a payphone at our school.
Wow.
And we did 2 weeks and no one came. But we had the best, and we came back and everyone had flu and we lost loads of money. And about half the people who went on the tour got back and were like, I will never, ever, ever do anything like that ever again. And the other half of us were like, when do we go again? I want to go again now.
That's like Guns
Um,
N' Roses. That's like Guns N' Roses. That's how they solidified their lineup. Basically,
oh,
like
really?
Slash and Steven came in last minute to do this tour, and then basically the car broke down. Everything went to shit. And Duff McKagan writes in his book, is like, and we all sat there, like someone went to try to find help, and we all sat there, and no one complained. And I'm like, I found my guys. I've been looking for the guys to take over the world with, and I knew in that moment. And I'm just like thinking, I've never found my fucking guys because
Well, I mean, I'm sad to say that nobody who I toured with on that first tour is still in my
That's
touring
what, yeah.
party. But I found the thing I like to do. Let's say that.
yeah.
The funny thing is, I was a touring musician for years. I did, a lot of big tours, but the ones that I remember, the tours that I remember the most are the first ones, because everything was a win. You know, Showing up, finding a place to sleep was a win. Getting food was a win.
Yeah,
Selling.
totally.
So
I
it's
mean, it's funny. Like, there's definitely that kind of like super hand to mouth tour, punk rock touring thing can be more memorable. It's more exciting, I suppose, in its way. I mean, it's easy to idealize, I think, on some levels. Like some of the guys in my band are a bit like, let's just get back in a fucking van and do like a tour of Eastern Europe. And it's just kind of like, we are all too used to having crew and bunks and hotels
yeah,
and days off. Like we'd last about 4 days before everyone got stabbed. Do you know what I mean? Like by each other. So but I mean, yeah, they're great memories, and it's a bit more chaotic. I mean, the level I tour at these days, because there's just a lot to get done in a lot of places in a comparatively
of
short
course.
period of time. My existence is really regimented, and I find it interesting because there's sort of a lot of the cliches about tour are about liberation, and I understand why, obviously, but actually, when I'm on tour, I am not the boss. Like my tour manager, Tree, she is the boss. She tells me what to do every fucking minute of the day. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just like I'm under orders once I get on the
The
bus.
nice thing about you is that I mentioned before the lyrical content. Like, I think that's why you might get, people love to compare, and people, but uh, the place you sing from, especially on this new record, like, I've had a chance to really sit with Undefeated, and I love the fact, you have the tattoo on your back. And you took a picture recently in front of the Undefeated store, which I thought was really cool, because it's a place when I go to LA, I always try, like, I have an Undefeated
Oh,
hat.
it was a complete mystery to me. I was like, "What the
I,
fuck is this?"
I was so I was saying, so you don't, and I was like, wow, he knows Undefeated, and I thought it was because it's like a sneakerhead store. So if you're into shoes,
Right. Okay. I walked past it and was just like,
and I figured that's what it was. But what I love about this record is, you always do, you always manage to bring people on a journey, and you always manage to tell a story, but it's not necessarily very obvious and right in your face. But on Ceasefire, you're talking to your younger self,
"So
and what I got from it was, I mean, it just, you get to a certain age where you do a lot of reflection, especially if you have children. I've got a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, and a lot of the time I see my behavior in my face when I see them, And that whole talk in that song about going back and forth with each other and giving, giving yourself a bit of a pass. Um, do these ideas come naturally, this type of songwriting? I mean, I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would say that. I mean, I don't want to make the process of songwriting for me to sound easy per se, but it is something that I try quite hard to be unforced, should we say. I want the process of writing is a reasonably sacrosanct one for me. I try and build barriers around it to keep it pure, I guess would be one way of saying it. Like I started out doing this, sitting in a room and going, "What's a cool song with a guitar?" and it worked. And why fuck with it?
Yeah.
um, but I mean, specifically with Ceasefire, I mean, I don't have kids myself, but like I have one of the ways that my kind of anxiety manifests itself is in having these kind of like endless silent arguments as I'm trying and failing to get to sleep at night. And my wife, who is a psychotherapist, asked the pertinent question one day, was who it is I thought I was arguing with. And not all the time, but a lot of the time I realized it was with a sort of hypothetical version of my 15-year-old self, who was extremely pure, extremely angry, black and white view of the world, ideals in a box fresh cellophane, you know, and a very simple. And I knew the answer because I was 15. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, I was straight edge when I was a teenager, and I've been to rehab, so there's some conflict there. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right. Of course.
and similarly, like, I mean, to pick an example that's a little bit of a flex, if you'll forgive me that, but like on my last record, we got the number one in the UK, and that doesn't fall out of the sky. We worked really fucking hard to make that happen. But on the day when I got it, there was a part of my brain that instantly just went fucking sell out. Because when I was a kid, like my self definition was I was the kind of person who didn't like music that was in the charts.
Yeah.
And it was like, now you're number one, and like, who the fuck are you? And ultimately, that's just not an especially healthy way of engaging with the world. So the song is about attempting to find some sort of like peace, on that level. I mean, I'm not going to say I've successfully done that just yet, but I've named the problem. I've acknowledged the problem.
That's beautiful, man. I've written a song to my younger self too. It's I'm so glad the internet wasn't around when you were thinking all this stupid shit you used to say.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm very glad the internet wasn't. By the way, guys, I'm just going to walk to where a computer charger is because my laptop is going to run out of battery.
All good. All good.
Wi-Fi will hold. It's funny you should say that. I actually made the gross error of when I was a teenager. I made a zine.
Yes.
Which,
what's it called, dude?
I'm not going to fucking tell you because there are every once in a blue moon, one of them surfaces on eBay or something, and it is the single worst thing in the world. It's basically my Facebook wall if Facebook had been a thing.
It's not called Turner Classics, right?
No, it's not. I'm honestly not going to tell you what it's called. So
okay. No problem.
But yeah, so that I am extremely grateful that the internet wasn't around when I was a kid.
It's
I mean, incidentally, sidebar, I loathe social media with every fiber of my being, and if I had a magic wand, I would destroy it tomorrow.
it is a unfortunately it's a necessary evil for a lot of people, especially if you're but it is. Yeah, I'm really glad I got to grow up in a time where it was not prevalent, and I see my kids
and a lot of people, you see people asking questions like, why did our politics go crazy in roughly 2008, 9, whatever?
Yeah, it's true.
Why do you fucking think?
Yeah,
like what changed?
I personally miss the days when people walking around taking photos of themselves were seen as weird and not a necessity. But
yeah, I mean, I think there's something very telling about our culture, the existence of the selfie as a thing. It's just a bit. When you were kids, you took photos of stuff, not of yourself.
No, definitely.
There's a great comedian named Sebastian Maniscalco who says he's like, you taking selfies? I call it taking a lonely.
Yeah, very good.
You were mentioning, you're talking about loving Black Flag, and punk rock, and and getting to number one and selling out. And I remember, Henry Rollins, and I'm not. You have to say this by, I'm a huge Black Flag fan. Like I've got in front of my house, I've got a welded fence, that's got the bars. There you go.
Nice.
I've got the bars logo on each side of this fence. My buddy's a welder, and he's like, let me do something really cool. So people walk by and they're like, what is that? And then other people go,
or else they're like, we know who lives there.
Right, exactly. But I remember in the 90s when Rollins was having his really, really huge time of being, becoming an actor. Rollins band was popular. Like everybody wanted a piece of him. Get in the Van. Like I remember going to see the spoken word on that Get in the Van tour when that book was published, the hardcover and all that. And I remember in the 90s, he was in Rolling Stone magazine. There was a full page ad, and it was a Gap ad, and it was just him in a black t-shirt. And I remember people were just taking the piss because there's Henry Rollins in a Gap ad. And I remember his whole meaning behind it. He goes, what's more punk rock than me being in Rolling Stone and a full page ad in Rolling Stone? There's nothing more punk rock than that. He goes, our band was never covered in Rolling Stone. We were never written about. We were never even mentioned. He goes, and here I am infiltrating. He goes, there's nothing more punk rock than that. And I remember saying to myself, that is fucking clever. And only Rollins could pull that off.
Yeah, well, true, absolutely. I do also think when you have conversations with younger people about kind of the, indie versus major thing, or kind of selling out and all those kinds of things, I suddenly catch myself sounding like an old man talking about the war in a bar. Do you know what I mean? I think that younger kids are just like, no one fucking cares. Shush. Do you know what I mean? Like, I guess the economics of the music industry have changed to such a radical degree
Yeah.
that, like, when I was a kid, you would disdain a band who had a song on an advert or something like that, or on a soundtrack or something. And now it's like, good for you. You're going to pay your rent this week. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, definitely. And I think the landscape's changed so much that any kind of success, I mean, you have to applaud that. You can't, it's not
right. I mean, this is it. Well, and the risk of sounding like a total hippie, like one of my more kind of zen moments in recent years is just life is too short to waste energy disliking bands. I mean, I cannot stand the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but like every morning they wake up and they make Red Hot Chili
Neither
Peppers.
can Neil Hamburger.
We just had him on our podcast, and
they every morning they wake up and they make Red Hot Chili Peppers fans happy, and like, cool, good. I hope they do that more. I hope they do more albums and more tours and make those people yet happier. That's one thing. And then to where this sort of came from is just that, like, it's fucking hard to do this for a long time, actually. Both physically and mentally in yourself, but also in terms of maintaining the interest of any section of the general public. It's challenging, and if somebody's pulling that off, I'll take my hat off to them, regardless of what I think about their music.
It's interesting how, like, in a period of time when popular music is shoved in your face, you're like, oh god, fuck off. But if you're looking at it in hindsight, like, I love 80s Bon Jovi music because I was never a teenager and television and radio wasn't telling me this is your representation of metal. And then, guys like Jason are probably like, no, it's not.
Yeah, sure.
So
the one like that always blows my mind is the way that people on your side of the Atlantic talk about Oasis. Oasis were Nickelback in the UK. Like,
okay, that's fucking fascinating. Really,
they were gigantically overbearing jock rock assholes. And if you were into any kind of outsider underground culture, you were scared of Oasis fans. They'd kick the shit out of you. You felt extremely unwelcome in their culture. Now, this was all happening when I was a teenager. I'm sort of, I can appreciate some of their songwriting, and I think it's interesting. They're one of the last great working class bands in British history, and I think there's an interesting sociological discussion to be had there, and all this other stuff. But like, and I watched the documentary about their Nebworth shows, which is a great documentary, and it really does highlight the cultural enormity of what they achieved. But it still made me feel kind of slightly unsafe watching it, because my teenage years were spent having my teeth kicked in by fucking Oasis fans. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and there was this moment in about 1996 when they went to New York, and there was a photo of Sonic Youth hanging out with Oasis, and it broke everybody's hearts over here, because we were like, no, Thurston, what are you fucking doing? Like, they're not cool and underground. The other version of this, it was amazing. Do you know Cave In?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so Cave In didn't tour their first two albums in the UK. They finally toured on Jupiter, and they played the Underworld, and I was there. This is in about 2000, probably 2001, and sold out show. Everyone losing their fucking minds as legendary bands come through, and they played an incredible set, and everyone went nuts. And they went off, and they came on for an encore, and they played an Oasis cover.
Oh no!
And clearly thinking that this would go down well, and it was a disaster, because anybody in the UK who likes Cave In sort of definitionally hates Oasis. Ooh. And no one had told them this, and they sort of boldly soldiered on through the song. But it was just fart in a spacesuit moment. Do you know what I mean? Everyone was just like, what are you fucking doing?
I spent my youth getting my teeth kicked in by Oasis fans will be a sentence that will have to go into my brain and go through the 90s internet of my brain and slowly process Oasis fans, violence, your
Yeah,
head.
it was a
Wow.
very atavistic culture. You know,
Gee.
it was very sort of, it was like football fandom kind of
Well,
vibe
I
as
think
well.
it's what they got so, and they got so big. It's kind of the same thing kind of happened on this side with Limp Bizkit. You know, Limp
Mhm.
Bizkit ended up developing this kind of fan base that had, you know, and I think it's what happens when you get broad success so quickly. All these,
Sure, of
there's a
course,
lot of
of course.
bandwagoners, and yes, you know, but like it's
I'm going to go ahead and be on the record and say that I despise Limp Bizkit, by the way. Like, I mean, I know what everything I just said about fucking Fred Durst just sounds like Colin from Accounts having a fucking flip out. It's just like, ugh, not for
yeah, a
me.
lot,
But
but you know, and it's too bad because you get a guy like Wes Borland who's so talented that almost
oh yeah, of
just
course. I
seems
mean, without
hijacked in the
question.
band. So I guess it's safe to say you were more of a Blur guy, or did you not?
No, I so on the there was this famous week in 1995
Oh, I
when Blur and
remember.
Oasis were in a battle for the number one in the charts,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that week I went home and made a T-shirt that said "shit pop," and I wore it to my school and got beaten up. I mean, I literally that was as I discovered Black Flag and Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat,
Yeah. Yeah.
which obviously weren't current bands,
Mm.
but you know, my I it was Britpop was monolithic mainstream culture. It could not have been more everywhere. I mean, it's what you were saying, Ryan, about Bon Jovi in the 80s with Metal Kids, but it wasn't just metal, it was everything. It was like, if you like
Gotcha.
music, you like this. And it was like, well, no.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I was getting into all this like increasingly weird outside of, you know, Butthole Surface and stuff like this. And then my friends were like, you heard the new Blur album? It's like, no, I fucking haven't. Um
Yeah, that was a very, very crazy time. And you know, I've had a chance to talk to Liam before. We talked to him at a festival maybe about 5, 6 years ago, and it was interesting to see where he was compared to where he would have been if he would have rolled into that festival in the late '90s. It was
sure, absolutely. And funnily enough, actually an old friend of mine plays bass for him these days and has nothing but good things to say about the man. So
yeah, I think yeah, but honestly, I totally get what you mean. I mean, sometimes things are so popular, and you're just like you have no idea like how much this is not representing what you think it represents. And
Yeah.
right.
That cave-in story
Yeah.
is just brilliant.
Yeah.
And like ultimately, I think that there is space enough in popular culture, particularly in the post-internet days. I think that's important to say because the other thing about the Oasis in the '90s, God, we've gone down a rabbit hole here, but fuck it, was that you know there were so many kind of choke points in culture. You know, if they because there were in the UK there were 3 music magazines and there was
Yeah.
like 2 radio stations at a push that would play anything rock related, and if they were going to play Oasis all day, that meant they weren't playing anything else. And the power vested in various kind of gatekeeper type people was really remarkable in retrospect, you know. And the last band I can really remember being like that was like the Strokes. There was this, I just remember it was just kind of, it was like everyone got a memo saying the Strokes are your new favorite band, and it was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
who are they? Like their first UK tour was like an arena tour, pretty much. I mean, they were just,
Wow.
it was just announced they were going to be huge. I actually quite like the Strokes, so whatever. But it like, it was an odd thing, and this was before the internet. And the great thing, you know, everyone spends a lot of time talking about the negative impact the internet has had on music, and there are good reasons for that. However, the diversification and the democratization of distribution is clearly a good thing, you know, because it means that you can't bully everybody into making them feel like they should like one thing. It means that, you know, I remember as a kid, somebody told me about the Cro-Mags, right? And I was like, okay. And it took me 2 years of tape trading to get a hold of a copy of
Wow.
Quarrel, because no one sold the Cro-Mags in the UK in the '90s. Are you fucking joking? Now, if anybody's listening to this and isn't familiar with Age of Quarrel, they can have it up on their Spotify before the end of this sentence,
Yeah.
and that is just better. It just is,
It
you
really
know.
is.
And there's a fair amount of this kind of like romanticization of like tape trading and flicking through racks and it being hard to get a hold of new music. And it's like, I feel like there's a fair amount of privilege in that attitude. Do you know what I mean? You had to have a certain degree of resources, both in time and money, to do that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? And like, you know, you can have a Spotify subscription for free and you can listen to every fucking hardcore band from the '80s now, and that's better.
Yeah. For
End
some reason,
rant.
I miss the chase sometimes though. Like why do I miss Blockbuster so much? Why do I miss paying $3 for one movie that might be a piece of shit? I don't know.
Sure,
But you're
you're right. Of course, there was more
yeah.
of a sense of investment, and I mean, I remember buying records I'd never heard, and it cost me 15 quid, and it was
Yeah.
just kind of like, I
It's
might hate this.
And
yeah.
did you bury your heels in the sand and just be like, this record's kind of bad, but I paid 15 fucking quid for it.
I'd
And
listened to it more than once, I think is the thing, which would not all the time, but
yeah.
sometimes would lead to kind of musical breakthroughs. I remember the first time I got a PIL record, Public Image.
Okay.
I got a PIL record because I like the Sex Pistols, and I bought Metal Box, and it scared the piss out of me. And I thought it was. I thought I was like, is there something wrong with this CD? Like it opens with Death Disco. It's one of the weirdest songs
I
ever.
know. Yeah.
But I'd spent money on it, so I persevered, and then I got really, really into PIL. So like, there was. Whereas now, if a kid pulls up Death Disco on Spotify, they might listen to the first 30 seconds and just go, nope.
No,
Um,
exactly.
you know,
You're forced to push your way through it because you said, well, I invested.
right?
I've got to get
Yeah,
it.
totally. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, and it's good training as well, because I think you reach a point, particularly if you're into kind of more challenging types of music and art, where you sort of learn that first listens are not necessarily where to make a judgment.
Some of my favorite albums from my favorite bands
Hmm.
I hated when I first heard. Like a good example, we had Billy Gould and Matt Wallace on talking about the 30th anniversary of Angel Dust. And
God, what a record!
I know. And when I first got that record, I had been a huge fan of The Real Thing, which is still a phenomenal record. But then when I got Angel Dust, I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is horrible. Like it's mixed weird. It sounds weird. The vocals almost sound buried. They're not up front like they were on The Real Thing. What is Mike Patton doing? You know, um,
Yeah, yeah,
what
sure.
is caffeine? Like, oh, it's like, but
It's funny
man,
though, because
it's
I
one
got
of my
into Angel
favorite.
Dust. I got into Angel Dust before I got into the Real Thing, and I thought the Real Thing sounded super cheesy the first time I heard it. I was like, "What is this fucking arena rock bullshit?"
Right, right. But I mean, you got to
So,
see at the time that it came out of. I mean, that album was born out of the late '80s when all that was still happening, and that
of course, yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you for coming on. You've announced the tour. The new record, Undefeated, is great. I believe it's your 10th studio album.
It
We
is. I'm wearing a Canadian T-shirt today.
I saw that Canadian
It
is
says,
not a genre. That Dynalone. Listen, we love Dynalone.
Yes,
"I
it's
love
so
Dynamo
funny.
too."
Love
I was
Dynalone.
in their store playing a show about a
Yeah,
month ago, and they gave me this shirt. And
Joel from
the,
Dynalone and the whole crew over there are great people.
yeah,
You
I know
know,
we're running out of time, but just
yeah,
briefly, you will enjoy this because it goes to some of the stuff we're talking about. Growing up in the '90s, listening to alternative music, like you weren't really able to differentiate between different types of North American music. I wasn't really aware
mm,
where bands were from other than just America, because I didn't know where Chicago was versus LA, or indeed Toronto or Winnipeg or Vancouver or whatever. And I didn't really understand the difference between America and Canada because I was 15 or whatever. And as I've got older, I've kind of realized that slightly weirdly, is this coincidence or not? Shit, loads of my favorite bands are Canadian.
yeah.
I mean, Propaganda and the Weaker Thans being the obvious two, but I'm completely obsessed with Cranky and Constellation Records, Godspeed You Black Emperor, all of that. I've got a Godspeed tattoo up here.
Oh,
Um,
nice,
you know,
nice.
so I like. So this, I mean, it's not the only, it's far from the only reason, but one of the reasons I'm really stoked to have Lost Stevens in Toronto this year is that I feel, I sort of, since a child, I had an affinity with Canadian music. So there you
And
go.
Dynalone is named after a Quicksand song, and Walter's a friend.
I didn't know that actually.
Walter's a friend of the shows as well. So, um,
Walter's a friend of mine as well, and what a lovely guy.
Frank, appreciate you, and we'll see you soon, man.
Take care. All the best.
Cheers.
So let me ask you something. How do you like Frank Turner? What a nice guy, right?
One nice, it's interesting that comes from such a punk background because he plays with a lot of rock and roll bands, a lot of punk bands, but there's this sincerity and beauty to his voice, but also underneath it all, like when you really examine a cake, you're like, what's the batter made of? Every time someone comes from a punk background, even Madonna was in a motherfucking punk band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, for
So
sure.
when your bones are from that punk scene and there's this energy to it, there's an energy, but is a sincerity. You can always kind of tell.
Yeah.
And the more we talked about punk, the more fun it is to just I kind of felt like we're just in a pub or a restaurant talking with a dude, and that's my favorite thing about podcasts and interviews. So I'm like, this is probably one of the standout favorite episodes we've done in a while
Yeah.
because it was just three dudes having fun.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, we just want to thank Frank Turner for joining us here on the show this week. Also, a big thanks to our friends over at Heartbeat Hot Sauce, the heartbeat of the Rockman Power Hour. Make sure you use our promo code Rockman20 and get 20% off your entire order. If you've never tried Heartbeat Hot Sauce, you are robbing yourself of one of life's great pleasures. Also, thanks to our friends at Studio House Designs for hooking us up with all this great merch, as always, and our friends at Audio Technica. Ryan, it's been a lot of fun. This has been a great episode. Again, Frank Turner, just if you've never heard Frank Turner, I'm not you, but I'm saying people in general, go down the rabbit hole. He is definitely worth it. The guy is an incredible songwriter, singer, musician, performer, all of it, and just embodies a good dude, and it comes across in this chat. So I'm glad that we got a chance to chat with Frank. He's just he's wonderful. He really is wonderful.
That I feel all giddy inside, It's not even like, oh my God, like Frank Turner's my blood tap. I listen to his music 24/7. But everything I've heard is great. And when you hear that type of music, you're like, I know exactly who I'm going to tape trade, if you want to bring up what we're talking about. I know who I would give a metaphorical tape to, or a figurative tape to, the type of people that would love his music. And yeah, Frank Turner, consider me a fan for life now. Just I always liked the music, but now the dude sold the rest of it.
100%. So thanks again to my co-host Ryan Stick. Thank you to our producer Julia Kujerski, and thanks to all of you for joining us on this podcast journey, which we absolutely enjoy. We're way past our 100th episode now. Well, not way past, but we're past it, and we're not going anywhere. So make sure you like, subscribe, let us know what you're enjoying, and any suggestions that of anybody you'd like us to talk to, or any subjects, we're always open, and we appreciate the feedback. And until next time, we'll see you on the Rockman Power Hour. Hey, thanks so much for watching the podcast. We really appreciate your support. And if you're enjoying the podcast, click this link right over here to watch the next episode, and click right over here and subscribe. And that way you won't miss anything.